Hello guys, Dylan here and welcome back. In today's episode, we're going to visit the state of Kentucky, specifically the small town of Stanford, on the night of January 6, 1976, a night that Mona Stafford and her two best friends would never forget. Let's begin. Mona Stafford woke with a grin on her face, smiling from ear to ear. Today was January 6, 1976, and it was her birthday. Mona had plans to spend her 36th birthday with her two best friends, Louise Smith and Elaine Thomas. Her plans for the evening might seem simple and not over the top, but that didn't matter to her. This planned trip was enough. Mona Stafford, Louise Smith, and Elaine Thomas, on the evening of January 6, headed out to have dinner. With Louise behind the wheel of her '67 Chevy Nova, they drove to Redwood's Restaurant, a restaurant that was located 35 miles from their hometown of Liberty and located between two Kentucky cities, Stanford and Lancaster. The trio would have this enjoyable dinner together with no consumption of alcohol taking place, and with plans to be home around midnight, they decided to leave Redwoods around 11:15 p.m. On their return, and once reaching Stanford, Kentucky, Louise Smith turned the car off of Highway 27 and onto Highway 78, bound for Houstonville. And right outside of Stanford, the trio would have an experience that they would never forget, creating a bond that would last a lifetime. Mona Stafford first noticed it, a sight that at first she thought might have been an airplane fire. Watching out of her window, she noticed a bright red object appear in the sky, out of nowhere. She would immediately bring this sighting to the attention of Elaine and Louise, motioning them to look out the window. The trio watched as this bright red light moved from the right side of the road to a point in the sky in front of their car. As this object descended upon them, they had realized that this was not an airplane and that this object was much larger. They would later describe it as being as large as two houses. When this object finally reached ground level, it stopped about 100 yards ahead of their car and stretched across the road, spanning from side to side. Although this object did not approach them at this time, it rocked back and forth for a few moments before diverting off the road and to the left out of sight. When this object disappeared, Louise Smith floored it. No one in the car could explain what had just happened, and neither of them were sure what exactly that thing was, but they all made an agreement that they would not stick around to find out. About a quarter mile was put between their car and the spot of the sighting, when blue flashing lights appeared to the rear of the car. Assuming that this was a highway patrol car, Louise began to slow her car down in an attempt to pull off to the shoulder of the road. Louise Smith soon realized that this was not a police officer at all, and the object that they had seen moments prior had circled back around. And this time, they were in for the fight of their lives. Louise Smith had lost control over the car as its speed began to climb. The car was now accelerating without Louise's foot being on the pedal at all. The speedometer would soon reach 85 miles per hour, and it seemed as if there was no stop in sight. Mona Stafford, from the passenger seat, helped Louise trying to overpower this unknown craft, and at least keep the vehicle on the road during this high-speed pursuit. While Mona was attempting to overpower this craft, she had an overcoming burning sensation in her eyes, and the next thing she noticed was the vehicle's instrument panel began to illuminate, indicating that the car had stalled out. But despite all of this, it continued to roar at top speed down the highway. Moments later, they noticed a bright light ahead of them, and fearing impact with whatever was on the other side of this light, they began to scream and brace for impact. Seconds later, this vehicle began to slow to a stop, and when Mona, Elaine, and Louise opened their eyes, they were sitting back on Highway 78, just on the outskirts of Houstonville, a full 8 miles away from the Redwoods restaurant. But what was odd, other than the event they just experienced, was when they realized what time it was. A full hour and 20 minutes had passed, and it was now 12:35 a.m. Had it really taken them over an hour to drive 8 miles? Later it'd be discovered that each of the women now shared a burn mark on the back of their necks and irritated eyes. Louise's watch also spun faster than normal. The women would also later individually draw sketches of the craft that they had witnessed, and they were all nearly identical. Days following this event, Mona Stafford suffered more problems with her eyes, leading to medical attention. Louise Smith's pet parakeet became completely terrified of the woman, and the bird would pass months later, and Smith's car also developed unexplainable electrical problems. News would spread quickly in the small town and the surrounding areas, and this would draw the attention of researchers from multiple UFO organizations, including the following: Jerry Black of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, would conduct an interview with the 3 girls. J. Allen Hynek of SUFOS, the Center of UFO Studies, and Jim and Carol Lorenzen of APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, would also conduct their own investigations of the case. Findings from these investigations would show that these 3 women were not the only ones with a sighting that night. Multiple individual sightings were reported from the neighboring counties of Lincoln and Casey. On March 7, 1976, Dr. R. Leo Sprinkle of the University of Wyoming would hear of this case, and he would fly to Stanford to perform hypnotic regressions on the women. These sessions would reveal that during the periods of missing time that each of the women experienced, that they were taken aboard the object that they had seen. While aboard, they were examined by what they described as shadowy beings, which they would later identify as similar to the depictions of aliens that many other abductees had identified with. Following this shocking news, and to further verify their claims, in July of 1976, Mona Stafford, Louise Smith, and Elaine Thomas would submit to a polygraph test at the Lexington Police Department conducted by Detective James Young. Each woman was able to pass this lie detector test with absolutely no issues and displayed 0 signs of deception. That is it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Before you go, if you are a fan of unsolved mysteries, the unexplained, and creepy stories, please do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. As always, if you have a future story suggestion, please share.